content presented in this podcast is based on real events and may contain graphic descriptions of violence, sensitive topics, and explicit language that may be triggering, offensive, or sensitive subjects to some viewers and listeners. Discretion is advised. The purpose of this podcast is to explore and discuss true crime cases for entertainment and educational purposes only. This podcast does not intend to glorify or sensationalize crime, but rather aims to analyze and understand the complexities of human behavior in the criminal justice system. We encourage listeners to approach this content with empathy, critical thinking, respect for the victims and their families.
Imagine heading out on an ordinary afternoon stroll. Nothing more than fresh air, friendship, comfort, and the familiar woods. That's how February 13th, 2017 began for Liberty German and Abigail Williams in Delphi, Indiana. But that walk never ended up with Abby and Libby back in their warm beds at home. But instead, what followed were years of unanswered questions, haunted images captured in desperate seconds, and a town plunged into fear and obsession. Now, in Shadow of a Bridge, investigative journalist Áine, Cain, and attorney Kevin Greenlee unravel not just the chilling details of a double murder, but the raw pulse of a community's grief, the wildfire of social media sleuthing, and the harrowing journey for truth amid chaos and conspiracy. Today we turn that story over piece by piece with authors who bring us face to face with tragedy, justice, and the shadow cast over the American heartland. So with that being said, it's time to start the show. Let's hit it. Hi, welcome to another episode of Mysteries, Mayhem, and Merlot. I am your host, Winnie Schrader. Tonight we're going to dive into a case that has haunted true crime enthusiasts, police, so many people, and the world for years, and that's the Delphi murders. Two young girls, Liberty German and Abigail Williams, went on a walk February 13th, 2017, but they never came home. And what followed was a chilling discovery of the mysterious recordings, which they captured on their phone moments before their death. But beyond the headlines and the speculation, there is a deeper story about small town in shock, justice system under microscopes, and the people determined to uncover the truth. Now, my guests tonight, Áine Cain, investigative journalist, and attorney Kevin Greenlee, they are husband and wife. And they wrote this book together, Shadow on the Bridge, The Delphi Murders in the Dark Side of an American Heartland. So I'd love to welcome them to the show.
Hi.
Hi.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you, Winnie. We really appreciate it.
Yes, I came across your book. I told you prior to the show that I was trying to find somebody who really knew this case, not just conjecture, not just what they see on TikTok and just reverberating what other people are saying. People that really lived and breathed this case. And I know there have been really good true crime armchair detectives, sleuths, a lot of podcasters have done some really good work. I'm not going to deny them that. But to really try and find somebody where there's no bias, no theories and other elements that can influence what they're telling me. So that's why I reached out to you guys immediately, because I have been binge watching as much documentaries as I can about this. And there's still so many unanswered questions for me. So that's why I was like, I got to get them on. And I was so happy when you guys responded. So, but now you guys are investigative journalists. Kevin, you're an attorney. So obviously you guys have those skill sets to really dig deep and learn how to cut out the noise and really focus on the facts. So is that why you guys felt so pulled to kind of look into this case and really put your eyes on it and see if there's something you could do to help?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And I think that is part of it. I think we saw the case, we came into it around like 2021, and we're just seeing, hey, the mainstream media and the traditional news outlets do a great job when there's big updates and maybe they break news once in a while and they're able to kind of give us some more information in the public to learn what's happening. But they don't have the resources anymore to just cover something really, really granularly and get all those details. And we thought with our podcast, we can possibly fill in that gap. And that's what we sought to do. But what we were very adamant about is we didn't want to put any conjecture out there. We wanted to do reporting, talk to sources, learn what's going on the ground, and not just say, maybe this happened, but say, okay, here's what the investigators are actually doing, or here's who's a person of interest right now, or whatnot. So that was our goal. And then the other part of it was honestly emotional, because these are two little girls. Abby was 13, Libby was 14. They're doing low risk, just innocuous activity in the woods. They're best friends. They're hanging out. They should have come home that day. And I loved your intro, because I feel like that is what grabbed us, because it's like, this should not have happened. And it broke our hearts for them, for their families, for their communities. So I think that also kept us coming back, because these two girls were extraordinary, and I hope the book at least conveys that.
Yeah. Yeah, from what I've seen, Liberty and Abby, they were just kind of those, typical preteen girls that loved they were in that area where they're still little girls, but they're growing into a teenager. So they still had that innocence of children. And, just watching them and watching the videos that I've seen in the documentaries, yeah, they were special. They were just like kind of a bright light in a dark world. And it's sad that somebody decided to, squash that light out for them. So could you kind of just give the audience a little bit of like the day of, like, what happened February 13th prior to them going on the trails for a walk in the afternoon on a Monday, because they didn't have school. And the following day was Valentine's Day, but yeah, they had like a extended weekend because they were had to do a snow day makeup, which we all know. I'm in Minnesota. I couldn't. So we do have those days. And so the girls decided to have a sleepover. So kind of let's start off the day of, before they decided to go onto the trails.
Yes. So that night, Abby had stayed over at Libby's house. So Libby lived with her grandparents, as well as her dad and her sister. So it's 3 generations in one household. Her grandparents were her guardians, but her parents were both, very involved in her life. But she's living there, and Abby is a close friend, comes to stay for a sleepover. That morning they wake up late because they spent the night, looking at social media, having some pizza, watching a scary movie. They had a great time. And they go, there's a plan to possibly go shopping with Libby's grandmother, Becky. And Becky sort of says, hey, if you guys help me with some of this office stuff, she's working at home, I can, I'll give you a little money and we can all go shopping. And at some point, the girls kind of come to her and they say, actually, we would like to go to the trails instead. And this was something that, Libby would do. They'd go to the trails. It's a beautiful trail system in Delphi, which is a very small town. And it's like a city technically, but it's basically a town in Indiana's Carroll County, very rural area. People know each other. It's pretty safe. I'm not saying there's no crime. There's, like most rural counties in America, and certainly in Indiana, there's a meth problem, but it's not like random stranger crime happening to, so it's not like this is a weird request. So Becky says, okay, you guys can go to the trails if you arrange transport to and from. And so Libby calls her dad, Derek, who agrees to pick them up at the end of the day. Sort of like, I'll be coming back into town at this time. Text me and we'll meet up. And they get Libby's older sister, Kelsey, to drop them off. And so what they don't tell Becky, and what I'm pretty confident, would have possibly been something that she would have an objection to, is that they wanted to go on the Monon High Bridge. So you can see that on the screen here. It's this old railroad trestle that spans Deer Creek, which is a small tributary of the Wabash River. And it looks it looks solid, right? It looks pretty, like you could walk on that. It's terrifying in real life. It's terrifying. pictures don't capture how narrow this thing is. There's planks missing. When you're under it, it looks like it's so creaky looking and just like it would fall over. But these are kids. They're invincible, and they think kids in Delphi
know best.
Yeah, they know they can do it. And they, kids are frequently going on this thing. They're taking selfies. They're like, documenting it. It's almost, I call it like a bit of a rite of passage in the community of like the kids will go on it. And then adults will be like, I went on that as a kid and I can't believe I did that. So it's like one of those. So Libby's been on it before. Abby's never been on it before.
Okay. So that was kind of like they wanted, let's go on the trails, and they end up on the high bridge. And the pictures, they are deceiving. To get a real capture of what the tracks look like, you need that aerial view of them. But there's missing railroad ties. There's missing boards. So I would be, if I found out my kid was on there, there would be a very stern discussion after that. But
I'm like, the girls weren't lying. They were on the trails, and that's an extension of the trails. But they just they did leave that out.
Yeah, they left the fun part out. Okay, so they're on. So they go on the trails. They finally get to the high bridge, and everybody's seen the pictures that Libby took on her phone that she posted on Snapchat of Abby on the bridge. And honestly, that is such a beautiful picture. It just kind of encapsulates the innocence of kids, and just kind of that almost into adulthood time. I don't know. That's the feel I got off that photo. And I thought it was great that she captured that, even though that was her last moments. But it was haunting, but it was a beautiful picture. So now from that point, what happened after that? Like, because all of a sudden there's this guy on the bridge. You got bridge guy. What happened there? Like, it's just like, I'm so confused.
Yeah. So this is unbeknownst to the girls, around the same time that they're getting there. There's a man also who's being seen by different witnesses, and he's making his way to the bridge too. And so we're actually able, with those witnesses, and they describe him, like you cover true crime witnesses, right? I see a guy and he's, older than me, so I think he's an old man. Or if he's younger than me, I think he's a teenager. Like, you're not so certain people are saying he's older, they're saying he's younger. The teenagers say he's an, middle-aged guy, and then an older woman says he's a younger man. So they're all describing a white guy, and they're all describing a guy in a specific, they're seeing a guy who's in this dark jacket, jeans, he's wearing some kind of hat. He's very closed off, very unfriendly. Like that guy who gives you the creeps when you're walking, in public. You might smile at them and they're just looking at you like death glare. And it's like, okay. And literally teenage girls are like, hi. And he like glares at them and they're just like, what the heck? But they have this interaction that's memorable. They're all seeing him. And one of the most heartbreaking moments for me during testimony was one witness described how she's exercising, she's doing loops of this whole trail system, and she goes and sees this guy, and she says he's on the bridge and he's almost like, looks like he's waiting, and that's how she described it. And she notices him, and then she leaves, and then she sees Abby and Libby, and they're like talking kind of intimately, like close together, chatting as they're walking to the bridge. So you're almost seeing these witnesses setting this up for this confrontation in this moment where both, he meets the girls. But anyways, what we know happens next, and we know this because Libby had the extraordinary foresight to actually film part of this interaction. So she got out her phone, and it's shaky and you can't see everything, but she's seemingly surreptitiously filming this strange situation that she and her friend find themselves in as they get to the end of the bridge, and it breaks my heart to listen to this because, if you didn't know what was happening, it might not seem like a huge deal, but you can hear their voices are high pitched. They're breathing heavily. Like, to me, they sound scared. And to me, like, as a woman who's been in weird situations, where you might be around like a threatening guy, they sound to me like almost like if we act normal, he'll act normal and he'll leave us alone, like I'm not acknowledging this, like that kind of thing. And unfortunately, that's not what happened. You can hear on the video, first of all, you can see Abby crossing, and then you see this bridge guy behind her coming in close. Abby makes a comment, something like, is he still behind me or something like that? So it seems like they've been communicating about this stranger who is approaching them. And they're not saying anything like, oh, it's that guy or like anything. They're just saying like, they're not using names. They don't seem to recognize him. And Libby's kind of making small talk about like, oh, the trail ends here. And then she says something that sounds to me like that be a gun. Is kind of almost like that be a gun. Like, like kind of like under your breath, like he has a gun. And, then you hear him speak, you hear this bridge guy speak, and you hear him say, guys, you hear this metallic clicking sound, kind of like a, like almost, I hear a gun racking, and I'm not a gun person. So, I mean, I had to listen to that a couple of times to be like, oh yeah, that's what it is. And then he says down the hill, and then the video pretty quickly ends.
14-year-old Libby German in Delphi, Indiana, we're now seeing the chilling video recorded by Libby of the final moments with their killer. Key evidence police say helped them capture and convict Richard Allen. Until now, the public had only seen this snippet and heard the murderer's voice. But this 43-second clip, played at trial and just released on a website that supports Allen, reveals the growing panic as Abby asks her best friend if the man following them is still there. You can hear nervous whispering.
See, this is the path that we get on. There's no path going there, so we have to go down here.
Hi. Down the hill.
Abby and Libby were ordered down that hill, police say, at gunpoint and killed.
So,
yeah,
they're abducted.
Yeah, and that I was so grateful too that Libby did that, because without Libby having that insight, because those girls knew something was off. It's that intuition. They listen to it, and kids have a strong intuition. I mean, have you ever seen a kid run up a flight of stairs when it's dark in the basement? There's something behind them, and they're, kids have a good sense of that. And, there has been talks that Libby wanted to work in law enforcement. So I'm assuming she was kind of a true crime fan as well. So she probably learned it from somewhere. But for a 14-year-old girl to think to pull out her phone and to start filming is extraordinary. And I can't, if it wasn't for that, I don't think we would ever know who Bridge Guy was, ever.
I agree.
Yeah,
I agree. These girls solved the case, and Abby contributed to this too. And then I just want to say with Libby, she wanted to work forensics. She wanted to be a forensic scientist at some point. She loved, kind of some of these crime shows where like the CSI people are figuring it all out. She also had a real protective instinct. Like if you were going to be rude to one of her friends, she was not the kind of person to just take that. She was going to say something, and she was going to stand up for what was right. And with Abby, she was an incredibly loyal friend. She was a bit quieter, but she was also somebody who was brave. I mean, she was somebody who actually really liked roller coasters and stuff. So she, I see them as two girls who were not going to leave each other, and they were going to try to do what they could in a desperate situation.
Yeah. And, and that's probably what Libby was thinking when she pulled out her phone. She's like, I got to protect me and Abby in case something happens, and just to have that for her to do that. And those girls were close. They had each other's back. So, it's sad that what happened, but I'm glad they weren't alone. They had each other at the very end. So that at least gives me some type of comfort as a mother, because the parents, you can sense the parents' anguish when you listen to them speak. Libby's mom she lived in Kentucky, But her and her father had some legal issues and had some mishaps in life. So that's why they were with their grandmother. But it's like these kids, I don't understand why this bridge guy decided to do what he did. And that's where, to me, that's where all the unanswered questions start following. So now they go down the hill, obviously, with this guy. And at that point, nobody thinks anything's amiss. When do things start kind of like say, okay, where's Abby and Libby? Why haven't they come home? Why haven't they called? No text. They're not answering their phones. How long has it been since the moment they went down the hill to when people started worrying?
So their plan had been, they did not set up a specific time to meet Libby's dad for pickup because, they just said, he said, I'm going to be coming back to Delphi at some point. I'll call you. And then once I'm kind of coming in, you guys meet me at the trailhead and I'll pick you up. So
Okay.
pretty quickly, it becomes clear she's not picking up her phone. And just to be clear, there's teens where, okay, I put it on silent or I'm ignoring mom and dad or whatever. That's not Libby at all. That's not Libby. She was someone who was going to be in communication. She was considered responsible for her age and mature for her age. So the idea that she's just not picking up, it's not something like, okay, whatever. Obviously that's always going to be a possibility with a teenager or with anyone, but it was concerning. So Derek shows up. I think I don't remember quite the exact time. I think it was around 3 p.m.
Yes.
So the abduction happened at 2:13. And,
Okay.
He started coming in around 3 p.m. and he's looking for her. He actually gets out. He's looking through the trails. He's asking people who are on the trails at that point, hey, did you see 2 little girls? And they're like, no. So he's doing that. And then he calls his family. He says, like, I cannot find Libby and Abby. We need to get down here and just, figure out what's going on. Like maybe there's a possibility they're just kind of being goofy or whatever, but this is concerning. They all look. And then around 5 p.m., they call law enforcement. They've not been able to find them. And law enforcement responds. There's searches, first responders, firefighters, sheriff's deputies, police officers, and, the family are looking for them. And there's a couple of possibilities. No one assumes they've been murdered. That's not what anyone's thinking. No one's thinking they were abducted by a stranger and killed. People are thinking, maybe they did something uncharacteristic and they went off with friends and have just been kind of not communicative, or they wandered off or whatever. And they're not even in the trails anymore. They went off to it. They check a basketball game that's going on. They try calling around friends who, hey, have you seen them? Did they come to your house or whatever? And then the thing that I think that everyone considers more realistic is that there's been an accident and they somehow got off the trails. There's steep ravines around. One of them or both of them are hurt. They can't move and they're going to need to be rescued. And I think as time goes on, that's what they're looking for when they're searching these woods. They're not looking for bodies. They're looking for Abby and Libby, who are presumed to be alive and possibly just stuck somewhere.
Yeah, that would be my first thought as a parent. Like, oh my God, is my kid like unconscious out in the woods somewhere? It's things like that. And of course, it being February in Indiana, it can get cold at night. So that's a concern too. So if you think your child may be injured and it's dropping temperatures, well, panic is going to set in. It just is.
Yes.
So they, how long did they do the search that night? I mean, so they obviously had the whole town basically out there with flashlights looking for these 2 girls.
Yeah, the woods were described to us as being sort of dotted with these lights, as people are going through, calling for them and looking at, at some point, it's like maybe there was a death and maybe they're in the creek or something, but like, again, accidental, not nefarious. They search, there's the official search, right? Which is called off at a certain point for legal and liability reasons of sort of like, okay, we can't, if searchers go out there and they fall off a ravine and then they get hurt or killed, then that's not going to be a good situation. But our understanding from talking with people who were there is that the unofficial search went onward, even past that sort of official, like, basically like, okay, go home everybody, but like some of us are going to stick around. So they do all that and they don't find the girls. They don't find what they're looking for. And so it's at this point, the next morning, media gets wind on this, and there's kind of coverage of, hey, there's these 2 girls that are missing. Let's figure out what happened. And the whole town, as you said, in the morning, employers are giving their employees the day off. Let's go find Abby and Libby. Neighbors are coming in.
Wow.
This is like, I describe it like, this is like this town's like 9/11. It's like 9/11 in New York City. People are banding together. They're trying to help their neighbors.
Yeah.
And look out for one another. And that's Delphi. And to me, Delphi has been really maligned in the past years by like kind of like people who are, I think, conspiracy theorists. But to me, that's Delphi. Delphi is a place where people are helping each other out. It's not a perfect place. No place is, but it's like, okay, this is an emergency. We're going to drop everything and help you figure this out and try to make this right.
Right. It's just a community coming together to take care of their people. And that, honestly, that's very refreshing to know that a town would do that. Because could you imagine missing your kids and nobody will help you find your child?
I know.
I mean, that would be awful.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's next day, morning's risen. So did they put on the official search again? So they had a lot more people, more equipment, law enforcement.
More people, and also by this time, obviously, it's daylight again, which makes everything easier. And then as the morning goes on, people start seeing some items of clothing in the creek bed, in the water, which is not a good sign. And then it's around 12:30 that afternoon when some searchers make the worst possible discovery, which is the bodies of these 2 precious girls who had been murdered.
Have you ever felt like something or someone was trying to tell you something? That inner nudge, that quiet whisper from the universe, with intuition sharpened by years of spiritual connection and a deep-rooted gift. Winnie Schrader delivers readings that are compassionate, insightful, and shockingly accurate. Whether you're facing a crossroads healing from heartache, or just curious what the cards reveal, Winnie creates a safe, sacred space to explore your journey. This isn't fortune cookie fluff. This is honest, intuitive guidance from someone who's helped hundreds find clarity, closure, and confidence. If you've been waiting for a sign, this is it. Book your session now at lovelotustarot.com and take control of your journey. That's lovelotustarot.com. Winnie's sessions are personal, powerful, and often life-changing. That's lovelotustarot.com.
Well, this city of 3,000 is on edge. 2 bodies found, no one in custody. And Candace, if you walk up and down Main Street, you'll also hear from people who are confident the law enforcement in this city will make an arrest at some point. But now at 4 o'clock on the Now Indie, the big question are the 2 bodies. Are these the 2 missing teenage girls? This is what I can tell you right now. Police telling me right now that the bodies, at this point, they cannot identify the bodies of being that of Libby German and Abby Williams, the 2 girls missing since 1 o'clock yesterday. They were walking together along the old Monon Bridge just east of town. They did not meet a relative at their pickup location, so those relatives called police around 5:30. So a search has been going on throughout the day since yesterday. As I show you now these images from Skycam 6 in HD, the investigation, I am told, involves city and state police as well as the FBI. Authorities are treating this entire area you see here like a crime scene because they believe, in their words, that foul play was involved because of the way the bodies were found in Deer Creek, a mile east of Delphi. State police today spoke on behalf of the families.
The family asked us to do is to thank all the communities around Delphi and the people here in Delphi for assisting in attempting to locate these the 2 young children that were missing earlier. They just wanted to say thank you to those people, and thank you. They were just wanted to express their gratitude toward the hard work that was done in helping search for these children.
Yeah, the mother of one of the girls missing is here on the scene. We asked if she's been given any new information. She did not want to comment at this time, so we're going to leave her alone, give her the space that she needs, and she says she'll talk to us at some point, and we said okay.
Abby is wearing some of Libby's clothes. Libby, however, is nude. They've had their throats cut, and there are some sticks on top of their bodies.
And I just want to give you a sense of this, again, as I mentioned, searchers the previous night had not been looking for dead bodies or a crime scene. So this was very unexpected. And the searcher who found them first, he made sure everyone else sort of, okay, stay back. Like, we need to preserve this area, essentially. Yeah. He thought they were mannequins. He didn't even think it was real at first. But at the same time, as that's happening, you're having searchers in the water or towards the water. This is all, the crime scene is this shallow indentation near the creek. It's not quite on the bank, but it's lower to the ground. It's almost like a bowl. And so it makes it harder to see the girls from the other side of the creek because they're just down. So it's a bit, so sometimes people describe it, it's almost like they didn't see them, and then now they're like right on top of them. And that's that's just the way the landscape was, this floodplain. And people towards the water are saying, hey, what shoes are they wearing? What, we found this tie-dye shirt, so it's all this stuff converging at once. And so then law enforcement is left to process the crime scene.
Okay. Now, with the placement of the bodies, and I found that odd that Libby was stripped of her clothes, and then some of her clothes were put on Abby, and then also too the placement of the bodies and the sticks on top. Now, to me, when you say sticks on top, that just sounds like somebody's just throwing some shrubbery and sticks on somebody to cover them up. But these were like 2 or 3 sticks on top of the body. They weren't like a pile. Is that correct?
Yes. So this is, when you're looking at them from an eagle eye view, right above, it's barely concealed. You can see them very clearly. It's just a few haphazard sticks all over the place. But when you're considering the other side of the creek where there is an access road, then you can kind of perhaps look at it more as trying to shield that side, because their skin is pale. They're wearing clothing that, has colors that are not in nature. So when I look at it, I see just kind of sticks thrown on, and I see either somebody who tried to start doing something and then just gave up, or I see someone who's sort of like, okay, if I position Libby's body further down in the shallow indentation and put a couple sticks up here, maybe people won't see, the blood or the skin or whatnot. So it's definitely not a very good job of concealing, but it's also, and we can talk about this, people have sort of said the sticks mean something. They spell something out there. And I don't see that.
Yeah. Well, that's why I asked, because, normally in that circumstance, if you put yourself in the killer's shoes, you would throw sticks and stuff on top of the body to conceal it. So that's why it was confusing, because it wasn't many sticks. And like you said, from an aerial view, the bodies were clearly visible. So it wasn't, was he trying to conceal and then got scared off or something and just ran? I don't know. So okay, so then obviously they remove the bodies, they process the crime scene. Now, one thing, there was some weird things that I thought during the medical examiner's reports that, now is this true? Neither girl had any type of sexual assault or anything like that done towards them. Is that correct?
Yes, in terms of, I think the language was nothing that they could determine, right? I think because they'd be looking for trauma, they'd be looking for semen or an abundance of male DNA, and there was
nothing like that.
Nothing like that. No.
Okay. So I can't imagine what it was like for the parents to get the news. But what was kind of their mindset? Because like you said, the parents are sitting there thinking that their kids may be hurt out in the woods. How did they process the moment they got the call that they found Abby and Libby, and it's not what they expected?
I mean, that's really life-altering news. And
Mhm.
it was just devastating to them that these girls that had such a bright future in front of them, all of that was gone. And you're in a situation you don't even know why, and you don't know who's responsible. And
Mhm.
Delphi is a relatively small town, just a few thousand people. So then you have to have in the back of your head when you're like in the store or something, is the person
Mhm.
who killed my child just a couple of aisles over? And meanwhile,
Yeah.
parents of other children have to wonder, is there an ongoing threat?
Right, right. God, can you imagine having to walk around town just eyeballing everybody and just feeling like you're just on edge all the time, and every person you look at, you're, doing the squinty eye and you're like, "Say something." Like, "I wanna hear your voice." Oh God, that does not sound like a fun way to live.
No.
So now with the police at first, from what I've gathered, were very close knit, keeping the evidence close to the chest for a long time. And the public was like, we want some information here. What can you give us? Do you have any information, leads, anything on this? So that's when I guess they processed Libby's phone and they found the video and stuff. But the one thing that I find weird is the police sketch. The original. This is like usually never happens, but they're literally years apart. Were completely two different police sketches. So
Yeah.
let's go with the first sketch. He looks like a very older man, a hat, you know, looks like a typical Midwestern dude. I mean, goatee. I
Mhm.
mean, my husband, who in Minnesota here is bald with a goatee and he's 6 foot tall. I mean, that's about 90% of the men in Minnesota, it's like he just looks so average. And, one thing I noticed that the police, when they finally showed the videos, they were asking the public, do you recognize any mannerisms, the way he walks, his voice? But nothing came of it. So so the original sketch, what witness was that based off of? Because years later, the police sketch looked completely different.
Yeah.
So were these from different witnesses?
Yes, they were. These were from two different witnesses, and oddly enough, the first sketch release was the second sketch done. So
It's very confusing.
So I remember
What?
we had trouble when we were interviewing some folks in the investigation for the book. We'd be like, "What about the first sketch?" They'd be like, "Do you mean the second sketch?" I'd be like, "Oh my god!" So
Yeah.
there's two sketches. Well, there's likely more. These are the two sketches that are released, and the public, I think, loves sketches because we can look at it and say, do I know that guy? Okay. Like gives us something to do. But behind the scenes, it was controversial to release sketches at all. This was not something everyone agreed upon because there was a perception of like, this is an artistic rendering of a person's fleeting memory. And like what, I mean, you might see me on the street and get a bunch of details wrong. Maybe I'm not that memorable, right? Or like, you're not no one's looking and saying this person's likely about to commit a really horrible crime. I gotta, memorize.
Yep.
So it's like it's a risk. They took a risk. And I think ultimately I can understand more now that we know more behind the scenes of why they were doing what they were doing. But at the time we were pretty critical about that for years, where we were like, you're releasing two sketches and it's confusing everybody. And
Yeah.
and from their perspective, they're like, yeah, but we have to try to do something. And if the first sketch didn't get anyone to say, hey, I saw that guy, maybe, so it's just complicated. But the first sketch comes from a witness who was driving her car on a road nearby, and she saw something disturbing. So she's driving slowly. It's a kind of a curve. It's a very narrow country road. And she sees this guy who she identifies as the guy in Libby's video. And he's covered in blood and mud. And the blood is towards his pants, kind of that area. And then it's mud all over. And her thinking is he fell down a ravine. He was hiking and fell down and, maybe injured himself or whatever. And as she's driving slowly, she's looking at him. He sees her. He kind of hunches down, does not seemingly want to interact or be seen. Now that witness did not come forward immediately. That witness came forward in the summer. So they saw this and they discussed how they have an anxiety issue, which same. So I can understand that. They were very, very, yeah, I know, right? So I'm like, so people have, said, oh, that's suspicious. And like, I understand that, but I think this person wanted to do the right thing and was very, very triggered and upset and freaked out to even be involved in this thing. And have ultimately tried to do the right thing. But, it's that. So that's the first sketch. It's the older man. And then second sketch came earlier. That's actually the witness who saw Libby and Abby going towards the bridge and saw a bridge guy standing on the bridge staring at her. And they had that interaction. Looks much younger man, kind of poofy hair instead of a hat. But again, those are things that I think could be interchangeable, right? Like I might see the poofy hair, you might see a hat, and we're kind of like, okay, there was something on his head, but we're not quite sure which. And this is an older woman, so she's seeing a younger man. This is weird. When you look at the features of the guy, the eyes, the nose, the lips, and you take away some of the details, it's not as different as you would think. On the surface, they look very different. When you take away some of those things, the basic structures, to me, look more similar. But she saw this guy and she was, she remembered it. And she was like, that was a weird thing because it was almost like he was waiting. And he's on this first platform of the bridge and she just kind of walks away. I think if she started crossing the bridge, she would have been in danger.
Yeah. Yeah. Because, with these witnesses that keep seeing, you kind of have to say, okay, well, from different perspectives, you have lighting. Now, like, did he have a hat on or his hair? When you watch the video, it literally changes. It's kind of like pareidolia, where as you're watching it for a minute, it looks like a hat. Then all of a sudden it looks like his hair because it's like you almost see the dip in the crown on the top of his head where the hair usually swirls. So it's like, it's like the video itself is really hard to discern the facial features. What exactly is he wearing? But one thing that I know people were really analyzing was something that looked like he had something in his pocket. And which experts, FBI forensic specialists and things have said the outline looks very similar to a gun, which there was some evidence that will now tie him to eventual suspect. So we'll kind of get into Richard Allen here. So years have gone by. These sketches are not bringing any tips in. I mean, there might be tips. Say, hey, I think it's my ex-husband. It's my ex-husband. I know he did it.
No, exactly. And it's like that. I'm not trying to malign anyone. I'm sure a lot of those people were trying to help, but nothing that pans out.
Right. And, there were some suspects too in the area as well. There was one gentleman, an older gentleman. I can't remember his name off the top of my head. But he was kind of an oddball too. And his friend lied to him about his alibi. But everyone's like, oh, okay. Well, the alibi was because he was driving illegally because he was dumping trash and he doesn't have a driver's license. So it's like, oh, okay. Well, maybe that's it. But how did they kind of hone in to Richard Allen? Because to me, he seems like he would have been off the radar too.
He was off the radar. What happened is that in the days after the crime, Richard Allen mentions to his wife that he was there. And she says, well, the police want to talk to people who were there that day. And so he actually reached out to police, and a volunteer from the Department of Natural Resources responded. He had a brief interview with Richard Allen where Richard Allen said, I was there. This is the phone I was using. Here are the times I was there. And that was really the extent of the interview. Or I should mention, in that interview, Richard Allen also mentioned he saw 3 other girls out there that day. And as it happens, those were 3 witnesses who talked to the police and said, we saw Bridge Guy.
Where was it? You called the 3 girls? They were up around the trail. I mean, I didn't interact with them. It was up around the trailhead somewhere. So you helped they were leaving, yeah. Okay. I'm assuming they were eating where they came from down to those cars parked and they were going to go back that way. I don't know. Okay. And then, did you see anybody else when you were out there? Not anybody that stand out. Anybody, all I stood out, I guess. And I mean, if I did see somebody, it didn't click with me. And of course, I remember it was a lot better when I talked down that day. I don't remember seeing, like I told him, there may have been somebody on the bridge or something when I was coming back through, but I didn't. The only ones that I really noticed seeing were the three girls. Okay. Because I was walking toward them, and I mean, they obviously stood out. And like I said, I remember it looked like an older girl with two younger girls. Okay. Just walking the trail. Okay. And I guess I assumed that she was probably watching them or in charge of or whatever.
Yeah. There's a lot here that we need to get clarified, okay? As you well know, we have pictures of an individual on the bridge, and to some great degree, you described that individual as wearing blue jeans, a jacket that's of the same color as that. It described the hat. It's hard to see the shoes, but they're kind of brown. Okay? And this is a picture that was taken with the phone of one of the girls. Okay, I understand that. And the question needs to be, is that you? If it was taken with the girl's phone, that is absolutely not, I mean, it's not me, but I never have met these girls before, so even if I thought it looked like me, if it was taken with the girl's phone, there's no way it could be. I've never met them. I've never seen them. All right, so that's, and as far, no, and let's just stop there. As far as my psychological opening, okay, I've been dealing with that for years. It's not something new. It's not something because I went out and killed girls. Now I've got psychological problems. Have I had issues? Did I stick a gun? I know how a gun works. And I wasn't going to shoot myself that night. It was probably a cry for help that night. You've obviously talked to my wife. So it is what it is. But I know that you haven't talked to anybody that knows me, has been around me, my family, not my family, that thinks that I may have been involved in this. And wouldn't believe it. This image, this person right here, he's wearing like a Carhartt jacket, just like you just told us. Okay. He's wearing the same clothing that you just told us. We just need to know what happened. Why? Sure. I said I was wearing blue jeans. Now, I think blue jeans is a pretty common thing that people wear. And I said I was probably wearing a black or a blue coat. It could have been a Carhartt, a zip-up with no hoodie in it. I've had black ones. I've had a blue one, or a blue one, a black one. See if I can get it. What? I guess, you're repeating what I told you I was wearing, and saying that that's me. And so the other kind of, and you're serious. You want me to, like, that is you want me to say that that's my card? We're going to leave your card. It matches everything. That is your card. So a lot of what we're trying to get figured out here today, right now, sure, exactly what's going on here. Why is this information showing us one thing, but then you're telling us another? What is it showing you? What? I'm just going to say that is, just say that is my car. I told you I could have been driving that car. Yeah, that's right. I don't know what it is but this seems to have taken a turn, You're sitting here, you're robbing, you're asking me things. I get that. Most of the people, but now it's going to most people have wanted to be eliminated from this. Sure. I don't want to be included to begin with. So until the point that you have something that tells you that I did this and you want a subpoena or arrest me or something, I've got nothing to put out. So I'm not real concerned here, but your attitudes towards me have definitely changed, and I don't like the fact that, it feels more like I'm being interrogated, and then you're going to tell me that you've already talked to my wife and my daughter and stuff. Like, how straightforward is that? Yeah. Well, what would you, okay, let's turn everything around. Tell me what you would do differently if you were in our situation. You had this information. How would you react? What would you do? You do the same thing that we're doing right now. What the information is you have that I was out there, and I told you from the very beginning that I was out there. I didn't hide it. You didn't. What did that hurt? Some of the questions that we did ask here are simply this, and I don't you feel like these questions all sound strange, and it'd be very even accusing in nature, but
I want you to understand I'm not trying to offend you, but all of that, I get help us out by getting to a little bit farther along in this matter. So, I don't know. Like I said, you went, you talked to my daughter. I can't tell you what happened.
And so this information is recorded, and somehow it gets misfiled. And it's because of it getting misfiled that results in the years of delay. Because if police had realized how significant that lead was, they could have acted on it immediately and made an arrest within weeks of the crime. But unfortunately, it was lost. Someone wrote on the top of it, "cleared." We don't know who wrote that or why. And also the name of Richard Allen was recorded on that tip sheet incorrectly. His name is Richard Allen. He lived on a street called Whiteman Drive. And so his name was listed there as Richard Allen Whiteman.
I want to jump in because people might be wondering, is that the fault of the DNR officer? No. He actually noted that his name was listed as incorrect, and he corrected it, and he noted on the paperwork, this needs to be followed up on. And then he went back, and people might be like, well, why didn't he remember it? What we have to remember is that in the early days, this is like a few days in, they were getting inundated with tips. So everyone would go in, they'd grab a handful of tips, go out, either clear them or write needs more investigation, bring them back, and then go do it all again and again.
Right.
So I think he's not somebody who's following where every witness was or what happened with this. So it's like, he's not a core part of the investigation. He's just trying to help. It was not his fault. He's gotten a lot of blame here. To me, it's like, it's just one of those things that happens. It's just one of those clerical errors. And if it had happened to one of the stupid tips about it being Sasquatch, then that would have been fine. But it happened to the one tip that actually mattered. So,
flash forward 5 years, there's a volunteer who is helping police sort and organize all the mountains of paper that this case has generated. And she comes across this and she sees, this guy, he says he was dressed like Bridge Guy was dressed. And he says he saw these 3 girls who saw Bridge Guy. And she recognizes that's very important because by this point, police have talked to everybody who was out there that day. And everybody who was out there had been identified except for one person, Bridge Guy. There were reports that there was one person out there dressed in this one certain way. He was seen by a number of people. He was captured by the video. We don't know who he is, but that's likely the killer. And so now there's this piece of paper where this guy is saying, I was dressed that way. I was there. I saw these witnesses who saw Bridge Guy. She recognizes that it is significant, and she calls it to the attention of a detective named Tony Liggett, who is now the sheriff of Carroll County.
And that volunteer, Kathy Shank, I just want to get her actions with this and her volunteering her time to this absolutely were the catalyst to make stuff happen here. And this is a woman who dedicated her whole career to child protective services up in Carroll County. So her whole career was around trying to protect children. So I think it's very fitting she would be the one to kind of come in and find what she needed to find here. It's just but yeah, I do want to highlight one thing because it sounds like, okay, interesting. I think the significance of him seeing these girls and them seeing him and identifying him as Bridge Guy is important because all the witnesses, no matter how they thought, young, old, whatever the sketches looked like, they're like, I saw Bridge Guy. I saw that guy in the video. I think he looks clean shaven. I think he looks scruffy, but we agree that was the guy in the video. And
by what he was wearing and all that stuff.
Yeah. And walking and how he was, and I think it's like, if I say, I was on the trails and I saw a guy with a beard and a gray shirt and glasses and whatnot. And Kevin sees me, that's going to have a heightened significance versus when it's just like one person seeing the other party and the other party doesn't remember, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. It's almost like he's giving half truths. Like, yeah, he is Bridge Guy, but he's putting himself as another Bridge Guy, not the Bridge Guy. So it's like he's giving these half truths. So, and then another thing too. With Richard Allen, putting himself at the crime scene the day, putting himself there. I don't know what would possess him to do that. You know, if he's the alleged perpetrator, why would you put yourself at the crime scene? You know, usually when people kill somebody, they get far away from it. They, they don't want to go back unless they're arsonists. They like to go watch the fire. But that's almost like what it was for him. Like it was weird. So
without interviewing him, we didn't interview him. I will say this. He was someone who was described often as an anxious person. And I can see someone thinking, okay, someone may have seen me. I met a couple people on the trail that day. I need to get ahead of this. And I also, I don't want to look suspicious that it didn't come forward, but I'm going to minimize it and explain stuff away and say, oh yeah, I was just, I was kind of saucy these people and whatever. I'm just one of the witnesses, and especially when your wife is pushing you to do so, because she knows you're out there. And I think he just probably felt he was kind of stuck into admitting to things to a certain degree. And
he was his own worst enemy in some regards. God, and we can talk more about that later. We mentioned the police had been very secretive about the crime scene. And one of the secrets they were keeping is that near the bodies of the deceased girls was an unspent cartridge that had been cycled through a gun. And that cartridge had on it the markings of the gun it had been cycled through. In other words, if police had the gun it had been cycled through, they could say this bullet was in this gun. And so after the lead had been rediscovered and they re-interviewed Richard Allen, he mentioned that he owned a gun. And so that was enough to get a search warrant. Okay. And they were able to get the gun, among other things. And they tested the gun and they found that the bullet at the crime scene did indeed come from Richard Allen's gun.
Okay. So and what they mean by like unspent bullet means that it was in the gun, it got racked out of the gun, but it was never fired. So it's still a live round. But the chambers, the pin, all that stuff leaves specific marks even once it's put into the chamber. So it doesn't need to be fired to get ballistics off of it.
The ejection and all of that will go. And ballistics is controversial. Like obviously that's gotten more scrutiny in recent years, but at the same time, in this situation, it had the forensic examiner and then her supervisor, without knowing what her decision was, they both came to the conclusion that this is consistent with being ejected from this gun.
Okay. So now they collected evidence, obviously going through his house with the warrant. What did they discover with Richard Allen that really kind of is like, oh, I think we might have our guy? Because he's like, I didn't do it. He was adamant that he didn't do it.
A lot of it came down to that bullet, because in that second interview, they asked him, this gun that you own, did other people have access to it? Did you ever let other people borrow it? Did you ever just go out into the woods in that area and happen to have your gun with you? So they were basically giving him chances to give other reasons for why his bullet was there.
Get an out, basically. Like, oh yeah, didn't take it.
He said, no, I was never out there. It would have been very easy to say, oh yeah, I always have my gun with me when I go out hiking. And so then it would have been very difficult to say, well, maybe the bullet fell out on another occasion. But he said, no one else had access to the gun. I never went out hiking with a gun or anything like that. And so basically by doing that, he was boxing himself in.
I do want to add, though, because there was some other weird stuff. This is a case that does not have any of the big sexy pieces of evidence that you want. Yeah. And that you can almost like do an elevator pitch where it's like, yes, the hair of the victim was found in this guy's house and that's how we know she was there. There's nothing like that. This is a case that I describe it like a rope. It's like there's different strands and you have to weave them together and then it holds the weight. And if you do that, I think it's actually quite a strong case, stronger than people realize, but it's a subtle case. It's circumstantial. It's not going to just be like, you have to kind of sit down and sit with it and let it simmer, I think, for it to kind of work versus, oh yeah, we got DNA, or oh yeah, the murder weapon or whatever. So I will say one thing that chilled the detectives when they were going around this house, because because they were always looking for someone who was familiar with that trail system, because they were like, there's no way some trucker just wanders into this and feels comfortable enough in the area to do something this bold in daylight.
Right. In daylight. Yeah.
They find this whole like guest, like little room where he has, these family photo albums, and there's all these pictures of him in the trail system, fishing in Deer Creek, doing all of this stuff. And it turns out he spent a lot of time out there with his family, but was certainly very familiar with this and had even crossed the bridge with his daughter on at least one occasion.
Okay, so yeah, it just proves that he knows that area, knows where all the dips and the valleys and all that. Okay, that makes sense, because to murder girls in the middle of the day, and if you're not familiar with your surroundings, you would be such a target to get caught. Okay, so they charge him. Did they officially charge him once they went through his house and pulled any type of evidence that they wanted to use to see if they could pull forensics, blood, things like that? Was he charged at this time?
After the house was searched, a couple of weeks pass, and it's during that 2 or 3 week period where the items are tested, and it's found that the gun does match. And then they call him back in for another interview, or that he comes in for another interview. And it's during that conversation where he says no one else had access to the gun. And by saying that, he's basically telling them, I'm the only person who could have used that gun. And it's at that point that they make the decision, okay, we have enough to charge him.
Wow.
He's arrested.
Yeah, he kind of did it to himself, didn't he? He literally... He inadvertently confessed to the murders without confessing.
And then he proceeds to confess like 61 times, and we can talk more about that. But he's the sole witness against himself. This man is just like absolutely at every turn bolstered the case against himself.
Now, during the Halloween season, the veil between the worlds gets thinner and the chills get real. Oh, so very real. Something is waiting in the dark, and it's calling your name. So answer the call this Halloween season for the Paranormal 60 presents Halloween Haunts and Hijinks, October 9th through the 12th, for a supernatural weekend you'll never forget. It's being held at the historic haunted Palmer House Hotel in Sauk Center, Minnesota. Join Dave Schrader from the Holzer Files, Ghosts of Devil's Perch, and the host of the Paranormal 60 podcast. He's teaming up with Dalen Spratt from Ghost Brothers and Phantom Forensics. And we have heart-centered, intuitive Diet Renee for a weekend packed with spine-tingling experiences. You'll have 2 nights of live investigations and paranormal experiments, interactive workshops, gallery readings, and meet and greets, live presentations with experts themselves. This isn't just an event, it's a doorway to the unknown. So you have to ask yourself, do you dare cross it? Now, tickets are limited, so please book your Halloween Haunts and Hijinks adventure now at darknessevents.com. Again, that is darknessevents.com.
And, obviously there are people, and his current defense attorney, which we're going to talk about, that Odinism, he's the one that it's actually brought forth to the courts to see if they could get an appeal based off of this evidence. But
he's not the appellate attorney. I don't know why he's even talking about it, because he's got
really?
Yeah, he's got some of the best appellate attorneys in Indiana working for him. The trial team usually does not come into that, so I don't. It's odd. We can talk more about that. There's so
yeah. So, okay. Well, with Richard Allen, so he's arrested, and yes, he eventually confesses multiple times, but now everyone's thinking, is it under coercion? Because he was put in solitary confinement. Even his wife believes that he didn't do it. She's very adamant that he didn't. And she thinks they're messing up his meds or they're drugging him. And so there's so much going on with all of his confessions. Now, with the 61 confessions, were they at least consistent?
Yeah. And I think one thing we were curious about is like, we know people say people who are psychotic say all kinds of things. You might confess murder. You didn't do it. You weren't even in the state at the time. So what you have to look at is what they're saying consistent with someone who's in a psychotic state. And when you hear, and we've talked to people who actually deal with psychotic disorders, and we've talked to mental health professionals. And when you talk, you're dealing with people who are not in reality, and they're not consistent. They're jumping around. They're saying things that, the TV told me to do this. Or they're just not tethered to reality. When you hear his recorded confessions, at least the ones that he was giving to his wife and mother on the phone, he's not in any sort of seemingly super heightened state. He's just saying, I did it. And they're telling him, no. And he's like, yes, I did.
I did it.
I'm
I
trying
killed
to
the
tell
2
you.
girls.
Yeah, it's very calm. And again, like, you can be calm and psychotic, but it's like you're not seeing the hallmarks of a mental illness. You're just not.
Another thing to remember is that if you're a psychotic, that doesn't give you the power to know details about the crime that only the killer would know. And in one of the confessions that he gave, he says that while he was in the process of committing the kidnapping and the murder of these girls, on an access road nearby, he saw a white van drive by, and that allegedly scared him. And police were able to investigate and were able to prove that, yes, indeed, a white van did indeed happen to drive by, because a man was going home from work at that time. And that day he used his white van. How could Richard Allen have known that man was driving home on that road in a white van that day, unless Richard Allen was there killing the girls at that time?
And that access road's not like a road. It's not like you're not just driving. It's a road to a guy's house. So
those little access roads are just rickety. Usually it's just like 2 trails of dirt and you just drive on it. So he was kind of like driving in kind of the thick of it. It wasn't like just this frontage road going on the outskirts of the tree lines and stuff. So obviously, it had to be near where Richard had his point of view and scared him. So you think maybe that's why he just threw a couple sticks on and ran?
I think
because of the white van?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I do think he was thinking, oh my God, like, I don't think he was expecting that white van. I think that kind of freaked him out. And I think he was probably in a bit of a panic and was more concerned about stuff on that side of the creek than on his side of the creek because of that. And I also want to add something. In that same confession, he talked about how that day he was at this brunch with his family, and then he leaves. He doesn't want to hang out with them anymore. And he drinks 3 beers from a 6-pack and then drinks some more and then goes to the trail and does this. So I think he's also drunk, or at least not necessarily drunk, but he's at the very least buzzed. I mean, I don't know what his alcohol tolerance was, but I can tell you I'm a recovering alcoholic. And when you're doing anything, under any sort of influence of alcohol, the logic kind of goes out the window at a certain point. And,
right.
If your
judgment is off, everything.
Yeah. And I could see someone in that state being like, all right, here's some sticks. Let me just get out of here. Like something like that. I think for me that clicked.
Well, yeah. And then describing his anxiety and how he feels almost kind of like that panicky kind of, so I could, that's why I asked. Cause I was like, did he just throw a couple sticks on and leave? And that brings us into that Odinism with the sticks. So we can kind of touch on that right now. Now, one of the theories that the reason why these girls were killed was because they were offerings to Odin. What is Odinism, and how does it even play a part in Delphi, Indiana? I mean, I've heard of Odinism, but not modern day Odinism. I didn't even know it was still a thing. How did this get thrown into the mix?
I'm so glad you asked, because we really tried to dig into this aspect because we didn't understand it either. We're like, we didn't hear. I don't know any Odinists. And what is it? And I'm always interested in learning about other religions. But so what we found out talking to The defense put it out as Odinism, but there's some terminology issues with what the defense put out there. So Norse paganism those Norse pagans worship the Norse pantheon, Odin, Thor, Valhalla, all that, Valhalla is like the place where they go to, but whatever.
Yeah.
So they're worshiping those, like, just like, if you're worshiping the Greek pantheon, it's like Zeus and that gang. So Norse paganism still exists. There's still people practicing. And in the United States, the terminology is different all over the world. But in the United States, there are people who call themselves heathens, and they're practicing in this in a way that's trying to be inclusive. They're not trying to be racist. A lot of them are anti-racist. They're just trying to do their own thing, and they're not trying to be white supremacist or any weird stuff like that. But unfortunately, Norse paganism has been, to a certain extent, hijacked by certain white supremacist groups. And one group in the United States, at least, that's, certainly folkish, meaning that they're exclusionary of non-whites, would be the Asatru. And these people are not necessarily violent or part of any sort of bad gang, but they are, exclusive. And a lot of people rightly, I think, see that as racist. And so that's objectionable. But they're not the same thing as Odinists. Odinists refer to like a prison gang, where they're like doing crimes in prison and also worshiping Norse paganism. So
Gotcha.
I think what the defense attorneys were talking about was more Asatru, because the people they were accusing don't have any documented ties to a prison gang, but they do seemingly do this Norse paganism, although I don't know what their actual beliefs are, or if they are consider themselves inclusive or exclusive or what have you. But there were a handful of people, and I'm really thinking of two in the Delphi area, who had these Norse pagan beliefs. And one of them, a guy named Brad Holder, was tipped into police early. And the tip was basically, this guy's got a kind of creepy Facebook presence and you might want to look at him. And police were interested because it turns out that his son had a connection to Abby, and they were dating, or boyfriend, girlfriend. But when I'm doing air quotes, because this is middle school, they like met twice. They're, like it was like one of those things like, oh yeah, my boyfriend in another school, like, maybe we'll go to the dance together, and then like break up. Like,
oh, you're cute. Sorry, you want to go out? Sure. It's middle school romance.
It's like that classic innocent thing. I mean, they're just discovering boys and all that stuff. It's not like a boyfriend girlfriend thing as we would think of it. But but there's enough there to look at, and so he's looked at, and he is found to have an alibi. He was at work, and then he went to the gym. They have him clocking in at work. They have him signing in at the gym. So it's like, okay. He definitely has.
And we should stress that where he worked and where the gym was is a considerable distance from Delphi. So he wouldn't have had time to like slip over and commit a murder and then do it.
But, Odinism's on the radar, or at least Norse paganism's on the radar. And, the crime scene is odd. So police do say, we want to cross out any possibilities. Is there a possibility that some of this is symbology, that the sticks are symbols instead of being a utility? And they do track down a Purdue professor to say, okay, do these mean anything? And they get a guy who's a Norse mythology expert who can read runes, which are the language of Norse. And he is like, basically best case scenario is that somebody was trying to do something with runes, but they're not runes. And I think that's really significant, because like if I like take a picture of some sticks that fall in my yard, and I'm like, look, they spell Winnie, it's a sign. And then you see them and it's like, okay, well, that looks like half a W. And I kind of see the I. Maybe over there, that's an E, but it's in the wrong order. Like, it's like language has to mean something. Letters have to spell something. And these don't. And like, and then that's where they left it. So police were interested. They looked into it. Now, here's the thing. This is a sprawling investigation. All these people from agencies are coming in to help. There's a group of investigators that kind of still were looking at that. And they kind of came up with this very far-flung thing where those guys are connected to people in Rushville, Indiana, and they're all linked. And I mean, God help them. I think they were very sincere about this. I just, they didn't have any probable cause, let alone like any evidence any of those people were in Delphi that day.
Yeah. Well, and if this is happening due to a religious, ritualistic, whatever, you'd think that there would be more cases similar to Libby and Abby's.
Yeah.
That's a great point.
Definition of a ritual.
And we can tell you there's no indication that there's ever been a case where a white supremacist group ritually killed 2 white girls.
Yeah, I mean, these are people who are racist. These are people who are like want to elevate the supremacy of the white people.
Right.
Killing 2 white kids is kind of antithetical to that. You would expect, we've seen white supremacists attack political opponents. We've seen white supremacists potentially kill minorities out of their racist beliefs. So you'd expect something like that. And again, I'm a big believer in anything can happen, but we need some evidence. And with this, the defense ended up latching onto this theory, and they didn't really expand upon what law enforcement did. They just sort of said, okay, it's a sacrifice. And it sounded really good, and the press ran with it. I mean, it sounded like interesting. So people were like, whoa, like this is wild that they're saying that. And
they wanted to bring it into the trial. And there's a rule basically that you can't do that unless you have evidence that what you're saying is true. Like, it would be great if I was on trial for murder and I said, well, it wasn't me, it was Winnie. Maybe that would work for me. But
we're throwing you under the bus.
But the thing is, that wouldn't be fair to you. It's not fair to bring your name into it and accuse you, an innocent person, unless there's some kind of evidence. So there's actually a 3-day hearing where the defense had the opportunity to put up or shut up. And at that 3-day hearing, they weren't able to convince the judge of any kind of a connection. And their experts, their investigators who worked on this theory had to concede, we don't even have any evidence that members of this Odinism cult were even in the town of Delphi on the day of the murders. And if your prime suspect, you can't even prove they were in the town when the murder happened, you really don't have much.
I just also want to say something like, people have this misperception that you need to have a whole group of people in order to kill multiple people. And that's just not true. You have single killers kill double victims all the time. That's not, especially if you have them at gunpoint. And, the idea that there was this whole giant group of men traipsing through the woods of Delphi at all hours, doing a ritual with, the chanting and all this stuff, and no one heard anything and no one saw anything, like that doesn't make any, and no one's cell phone pinged off the tower, or like, it just doesn't, and it doesn't make any sense. And it's kind of, there was enough there that I could understand why police looked at it. And there was enough there that, there's little tidbits that people pull out and say, this is really good, but you need more than that. It can't, there's just, at every turn in every major case is a bunch of weird stuff that happens that is coincidence. There's the sex offender that lives next door that turns out to have not done it. There's this robbery gang that turned out they didn't do it either. There's just stuff like that happens. And this is one of those. It's just interesting, but it doesn't lead you anywhere.
Well, and I think, that's what leads me to my next question. And this is the one that's been bothering me. And I'm sure it's been bothering many people because they really haven't touched on it in the documentaries. I think people are grasping for rationalization of why this happened and maybe even coming up with theories on their own, because this seemed like it was so out of character for Richard Allen. He didn't have any priors of violent history or anything like that. So what about Richard Allen that we don't know about, that the public, documentaries and the public has not told us? Or, does he have a mental history of violence or saying violent things? I mean, is there something that can be tangible onto why he did this?
Yeah, no, definitely. And this was something we were also like, okay, there's been all these people who've come up, they're sex offenders, or they hit their girlfriend, or there's some violence there, there's some creepiness there. So this guy is just this random CVS shift manager, no criminal history that we can find, no indication of any problems. So what happened here? that's the most natural question that, you know, you would want to have cleared up. And what we found out just through reporting and also through attending the trial was, you know, when you talk to people who worked with him at CVS, he was a CVS manager. He worked at a couple different stores in that chain. And most people were positive. They were like, he's very quiet, but he was a pretty good boss and could be friendly, could be funny even, but, you know, mostly kept to himself. So nothing crazy there. Handful of people, though, where they're like, he's a micromanager. He was very controlling of like me specifically and would be like writing me about all this stuff and wouldn't treat other people like that. So he'd like hone in his like weird anxieties on me, and it became a whole issue. And he was like and these were women, you know, a woman, very controlling, just kind of like it became like a problem. And then the other thing we found out was that Walmart was a different experience. Walmart was another place where he worked, and he worked further away from his family and sort of was almost like living apart from them at times during that experience. Like they'd be there and he'd be kind of working and commuting to visit them at some points. And with Walmart, it was like day and night. They said he was a creep, like a real, like leering, creepy boss, just to like get me away from this guy, like sexual pervert kind of vibes.
Really?
Had, really bad feeling about him there. And I just thought it was interesting because it was like CVS, they didn't feel that way. They just didn't. But at Walmart, they seemingly did. So I don't know. It's like he's presenting differently to different people. You know.
Oh, maybe he learned.
Right. Or he learned from further away. He's like, I can
be not be creepy in public. You gotta do that behind closed doors.
Yeah, I gotta do that far away from where my family is. But here's the other thing that we learned. And this is interesting. And this was a trial. So Richard Allen had a history of just falling apart completely under the slightest stress. Like we all have work stress, but he would end up like curled up in a ball crying because he had to like make a management decision, or like he'd get promoted and they'd be like, you're doing good work, we're going to promote you. And it's like, yay. But then it's like, he cared so much about people being upset with him that then he'd just start freaking out and his wife would like have to put him back together and he'd get demoted again. Like he was a guy who was just like seemingly incapable of dealing with stress. Like it just would shatter. And that got to the point where at one point there's one incident that was discussed that there's some kind of freak out at his house and he jams a gun in his mouth and threatens to kill himself in front of his family. So, you know, like
what?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, and that's not violent in the sense that it's being violent to someone else, but that's a pretty violent thing to be doing in front of your family, obviously.
Right. To put that trauma in front. Oh my God. See, they didn't describe him like that. Even his wife didn't describe. That wasn't even brought up in the documentaries. Now, if that was all said, they could have cut out the whole thing of Odinism and it would have been like, you know, one and done. Because, that kind of behavior is not normal. And how they portray him is that he's just a normal guy. He's a loving husband. He's friendly. Knowing that he did that to his family, that is horrific.
I wish they'd asked I wish they asked her about that because it would have been great to understand her perspective on that. And also, I'm just going to say, like, someone threatening to do that in front of you, that's also highly manipulative behavior. Like, it's a cry for help. It's also like, if you don't do what I want, you know, I'm going to.
Right. Like it is a very manipulative tactic to do that to people. I had an ex.
Like, I don't, with his wife, right? Like, I mean, he's a manipulator and like, she may not see that because I think he was a successful one. And if you see the police footage of them together in that room, and I wish they'd asked her about this too, because it was so odd. She tells him, she's like, you didn't tell me you were on the bridge that day. And instead of being like, oh, sorry, I must have forgot, or like validating her feelings, he goes into this like, no, I totally did, you know, and like,
no,
you know, like,
I think,
and then he's like, I love you, you know, and it's like,
then he's saying, I know that you know that I couldn't have done this.
Okay, love Kevin. We have a good marriage. I like to think we have a good marriage. I love him. I trust him. If I come into the police station over something like this and he's hitting me up with that line, I know you know I didn't do this. I mean, I would be out of there so fast because it's like
I would have left, slam door, told the cop, cuff him, put him in the bathroom.
I'm like, you owe me an explanation of why this is happening. You don't tell me what I'm thinking. Like, how dare you? Like, but it's just a weird vibe in that video. But
Ricky Allen's wife, Kathy, then enters the interview room.
Don't know. How did a bullet from your gun get out there?
I don't know.
Was they sick from work coming?
I know that's what they believe me. That's what they're telling me.
But how would it get there?
I don't know.
They said there was one in your box above your dresser that matched it.
They showed me that picture too. I can't explain it. And I know.
I can't either. They keep asking me, and I don't know how they answer that.
I don't know. I think she. I mean, I feel bad for her. I think she's probably in some level of denial about this, and it's easier to think, the police got it wrong than I got it wrong, and I was married to this for all these years.
Oh, yeah, and love is kind of blind, and with him being that manipulative, there's probably some emotional abuse going on in that household as well, which I have been a part of in a domestic violence situation many years ago.
Sorry.
And it beats you mentally to the point where you feel like everything you're doing is wrong. So that could very well be why she's in denial, because she don't dare say he did it.
Yeah. I'm my heart goes out to anyone in that situation. And that's why with her, I see her as a victim too. I mean, people have criticized her for continuing to sort of stand by her man. And I understand that. But at the same time, I'm like, we don't know what was going on behind closed doors. And she can claim it was all sunshines and rainbows, but we know that wasn't true. And it's,
And I think that's why so many people had these unanswered questions, because how she painted him, how some of the people that, happened to go into CVS and interact with him, he was a pleasant person. He was a loving husband and father, things like that. So knowing more of that stuff behind the scenes of what she was dealing with, well, it's starting to paint a lot of different picture about what he looks like and what he could have possibly done. Because it just, like, out of the blue, you don't murder two young girls for no reason at all. And I mean, unless you have a psychotic break and you black out and somebody takes control over your body. We've all seen those horror movies.
Yeah.
But
this story is just some of the exhibits presented in a multi-week trial.
I did it. No, I did it. What? I killed Abby and Libby.
That's the voice of Richard Allen talking to his wife Kathy Allen on April 3rd, 2023, confessing to killing Abby Williams and Libby German near the Monon High Bridge in February 2017. Allen's wife refuses to believe what her husband is saying, including in this May 10th phone call.
I think you are not well. So you don't need to be saying you did something you didn't do.
It's important to note, doctors testified in court Allen was experiencing psychosis during at least some of these calls. These phone calls were released to YouTuber Tom Webster, who has followed the murder of Abby and Libby for more than 4 years.
Well, I saw Judge Gull issued a ruling saying that you had to send a $25 money order to the Allen County clerk, so I did. And I asked for these 4 items that I had seen in the courtroom, but I wanted to get a better look.
Webster received multiple phone calls where Allen confessed to his wife and to his mother.
So did Kathy tell you that I did it?
Webster also got 2 videos of Richard Allen being interrogated in October 2022, shortly before he was arrested. On October 13th, Allen is asked if he is Bridge Guy.
The question needs to be, is it taken with the girl? Something that is absolutely not, it's not me.
These exhibits are just a few of the dozens used during Richard Allen's trial.
I'll say this. He, in his most detailed confession, he said he wanted a woman or a girl that day. And I suspect that he had a power fantasy about that, because he was I'm sorry, I'm not trying to be mean. He was a hot mess. Like, this guy was just like a whiny, and that would be fine if he wasn't, trying. I think he wanted to reclaim his sort of masculinity by dominating somebody else. And he had this whole fantasy in his head about what that would be like. And it was a disaster. And he didn't end up them. He didn't end up getting what he wanted, and he ended up just panicking and killing them. I think that's what happened. I think he just, these predators like this, they almost harbor the sexual fantasy and they build it up in their mind. Like, okay, I'm going to do it today, finally. And then it's just like, he doesn't know what he's doing and it's a total mess. And, he just, I don't know, just kind of retreats back
Mhm.
into his normal life for years and just pretends like it didn't happen. And ultimately, they caught him. But
And
I
that's
think, yeah.
it does happen though, because just a few years back I interviewed the little boy who was thrown from the balcony at the Mall of America here in Bloomington, Minnesota. And he's recovering well. He's 11 now and he's doing sports. But the guy that literally he went up to the children, was talking with them, chatting with them, and he just grabbed them and threw them over the balcony 3 floors down. And I mean, he was pretty much dead, but they got him back and he had a long recovery. But the perpetrator, he said he was tired of getting rejected by women. He was awkward. He didn't know how to interact with people properly. And he went to the Mall of America that day because he was hell bent on killing a woman. But he freaked out and grabbed the woman's children and a child and threw him over, not her. So it's like split moment of just boom, I have an opportunity, I got to take it. That could have very well been. And from what you've been saying about how he was in the past, and I'm sure they probably found a lot of information on his computer to verify his strange encounters. I don't know.
He was looking up like, I mean, it was like weird, like most effed up movie on Netflix. But I mean, I'm sure most horror fans would probably say something. It wasn't too crazy by the end of the day, but he was at the time close to when he was arrested. He was, looking up like Delphi updates, which I'm not going to say, listen, a lot of people in the area were looking up stuff like that. I'm not going to say that alone is any sort of damning information. It's just interesting that he was almost like, like, do they have any updates?
An eye on the investigation.
So they're about to.
They do that. They will do that. I've watched many shows and it happens. They do follow their own case.
Yes.
Because they want to know. And it's kind of fun for them too. I mean, they get a thrill off of it. So, but the book that you guys have is Shadow on the Bridge, The Delphi Murders, The Dark Side of American Heartland. I will have a link for that in today's description. And guys, do me a favor, go check out the Murder Sheet podcast. You guys obviously covered this case in depth. What other cases have you guys covered on your podcast?
We've done the Burger Chef murders, the donut shop killers. You used to have a restaurant theme, so a lot of
I know.
And gosh, Idaho murders recently. So we kind of do anything where we feel we can add some legal analysis.
We do a lot of stuff.
Yeah. And I went back and I listened, and that's why I wanted to have you guys on, because you guys, you being an attorney, you can look at the legalese aspect of things and just kind of get that, well, we can't do this. That's not legal to take a look at it that way. We got to do it this way. And, because being a true crime podcast, man, you can get sued for defamation left and right. So you got to be careful. But it also gives a perspective of looking at it as a lawyer, as a prosecutor, as a defense attorney. It's giving you you have a different perspective of how you can look at the case. And with you being an investigative journalist, you guys are just two peas in a pod making a podcast and being successful at it. So I congratulate. So guys, please check it out. And what's the website? Where can they find you? Is it just murdersheet.com?
It's going to be murdersheetpodcast.com, but we're also on pretty much every, Spotify, Apple, Amazon, all of the podcast places.
Oh, perfect. Well, I will have a link for that as well, along with your book. Please rate and review their podcast, rate and review the book, because it helps it get seen by more like-minded people out there. But thank you guys so much for coming on. This was really, especially hearing about Richard Allen, that was insight that I had no idea on. And now it gives me a clearer picture of why he may have done what he confessed. I mean, he did do it. I guess I can't get sued for his own admission, but that was one thing that was gnawing at the back of my head. So I thank you for clarifying that for me, and probably for a lot of the listeners. But this case, my heart goes out to the Williams family and the German family, and just Abby and Libby's friends having to grow up knowing that two of their friends were murdered. That can't be easy on the soul either as a young child, and how the children were impacted in this town, the whole town of Delphi. blessings to you. My hearts go out to you. We're in Midwest, so we understand that heartfelt thank yous and condolences. But thank you guys for shedding light on this and giving it a clear and concise look at a case. And because I think that's what people are missing, because with social media and everything's fact. Everything's fact. Please check out my website, mysteriesmayhemmerlot.net. You can check out merch, books that I've done interviews for. So there's a link for the interview and to buy the book, which is, I make it easier for you guys to find the stuff. But thank you guys so much. And I hope to see you all next week.
Thank you for joining me for another episode of Mysteries, Mayhem, and Merlot. And until our next case, my armchair detectives, stay safe, stay vigilant, and stay aware. I'll see you right here next week on Mysteries, Mayhem, and Merlot.